All right, Jay, 50 to 91% of all sales, folks, listen, are influenced by word of mouth. So this is not a niche book. This is an important work. That data just drives the message home. Are you shocked that it was 50 to 9? I would have thought it would have been, I thought the data would have been closer to 75 to 91%. I'm a little shocked that it's not a little bit higher. They give a little bit of a range there.
Yeah, well, it's higher on the B2B side, right? So you get into that 80, 90% when you're thinking about business-to-business purchases, because everybody double checks everything in business before you just go off and send an invoice or write a check. On the consumer side, word of mouth, massively important, but there are some things that you're not necessarily going to check with people on. If you're going to go buy licorice at the movie store, you're not going to be like, hey, let me go check reviews on these red ropes before I give you my $4. So there are certainly some categories where word of mouth isn't quite as important, but on the whole, it's exceedingly important. But the part that blows us away, and we did a tremendous amount of research for the book, and the thing that really shook us up is not the influence of word of mouth, because most people in business will acknowledge that word of mouth is important. But the part that's remarkable, and frankly why this book exists, is that it's super important, but nobody has an actual strategy for it. Let's just say it. It's 50 to 90% of your business, yet nobody listening to us right now probably has an actual word of mouth strategy. You have a marketing strategy, you have a content strategy, a social strategy, a PR strategy, a crisis strategy, a sales strategy, but nobody has a word of mouth strategy. We just take it for granted. We just assume that our customers will talk about us. We just assume that they will tell our story. But why do we think that? What are we giving them to allow them to tell the story? Nothing. And it's a huge opportunity for everybody.
That's right. And folks, I want to tell you something. This book takes you through what you need to know, the 4 talk triggers criteria. So we're talking about criteria first, and then Jay goes through the 5 types. We're going to spend a little bit of time on the 5 types of talk triggers, and then how to create the talk triggers in 6 steps. So I just want you folks to understand that this book walks you through. I mean, it's like Jay, it's like you're holding their hand on understanding the criteria. And I just want to overview that real quick and let you just kind of run, okay? Because we're not going to be able to cover it all, but we'll give a good summary and let people dive into the book. Let's talk about the criteria for creating talk triggers. You say there are 4. I'll just run through them and let you teach. Be remarkable, be relevant, be reasonable, be repeatable. So this is the criteria. Teach a little bit.
Yeah, well, let me define a talk trigger real quick before we get into that. A talk trigger is a strategic operational choice that you make in your business that creates conversation, that turns your customers into volunteer marketers, that clones your customers. Look, there's a saying in business you probably talked about on the show at one point called advertising is a tax paid by the unremarkable. Now, that's not entirely true, but it's true enough. I don't know everything, but I do know this. The best way to grow any business is to have your customers grow it for you. But for that to happen, you need them to tell your story. And a talk trigger is the story. But not every differentiator you can come up with will work as a talk trigger. Not everything you conjure will serve as a reliable word of mouth strategy every day, week, month, quarter, and year, which is what we're looking to do here. So it must be remarkable, which means it must be worthy of remark. It has to be a story worth telling. It has to be repeatable, which means that every customer gets access to this operational differentiator. It's not something that only your best customers get. They don't just get it on their birthday. It's every customer every time. It has to be reasonable, meaning that the way to create conversations is not to shock and awe people by doing something giant. Because when you offer customers something that's too big, it actually creates suspicion, not conversation. And the last thing it must be is relevant. It has to make sense in the context of who you are and what you sell. This isn't about going viral. This isn't about renting an elephant and walking it down Main Street. This is about doing something different in your business that customers notice and talk about. If I could, I'd offer you an example.
Yeah, go for it.
There's a business in Sacramento, California called Skip's Kitchen. It's a very simple business. It's a counter service restaurant. You walk to the front, you order 2 patty melts and an onion rings and a chocolate shake, and when your food's ready, they bring it to your table. We've all been to a restaurant like this, but you've never been to a restaurant that has a talk trigger like this. Before you pay, the counter person at Skip's pulls out a deck of cards and fans the cards face down in front of you. And they say, pick a card. And you pick a card. And if you get a joker, your entire meal is free, whether you've ordered for just yourself or you and 10 friends. Now, Skip's Kitchen has been in business for 10 years. Skip Wall and his wife started it. He used to be the regional manager for all the Chili's restaurants in Northern California. Quit that, started his own business. 10 years. They've never spent a single penny on advertising ever. There's a line to get in almost every day. They were just named the 29th best hamburger restaurant in America by USA Today newspaper. And it works so well because about 3 people a day, average, about 3 a day, win this joker game. And when they win, they go crazy. They're like, they're taking selfies with their Patty Melts and they're calling their mom crying and they're putting reviews on Facebook and Google and Yelp and TripAdvisor. Like a high school marching band shows up. It's a whole thing. And in Sacramento, despite the fact that outside this restaurant, there's a very large neon sign that says, quite clearly, Skip's Kitchen, in Sacramento, most people call it that joker restaurant. That's how effective it is as a conversation creator. Now, that's not that hard to do, but it is an operational choice. It's not really marketing. It's an operational decision that creates a marketing advantage. Anybody could do something like that. It's just that, unfortunately, almost nobody does.
Yeah, and so I love that example. And so let's contrast that story with something that you say in the book, and I've seen you say this in talking about this topic, which is that competency doesn't create conversations. So what you think might be a trigger, and that's why this book is so valuable, you walk us through, but I just want to put this out here before we move on, that you telling a story about how effective your product is not necessarily going to trigger anything. Because here's the deal. I'm assuming that there's a good burger there or people wouldn't go back. It's not that the burger's life changing. It's that the burger's good, but the experience and the opportunity to win the food lottery in the form of a $47 meal is what they're talking about.
That's a story. You're exactly right. And that's what we say, that competency doesn't create conversations because we expect competency. And this is the mistake we make in business all the time. We think if we run a good business, people will talk about it, but they don't, because they expect you to be good, and your competition is also good, or they wouldn't be in business. Look, I don't know everybody tuning in today. I'm sure I know some of you, but I guarantee you this is true. Nobody has ever said, "Hey, let me tell you about this perfectly adequate experience I just had."
Yes, that's right.
That's a really bad story. It's not worth telling. It's not worth listening to. So competency keeps your customers, but the story turns those customers into volunteer marketers. And so that's why a talk trigger isn't about making a better burger. It's about doing something that people will actually notice.